From the Longhorn Radio Network, Adventure and Mystery, classic series from radio's golden past. Presenting Clive Brooks in The Secrets of Scotland Yard.
How do you do? This is Clive Brooks. Most of the programs in this series have been casebook histories of that horrifying but strangely intriguing topic, murder. Now, these cases can be divided roughly into two categories: murder by poison and murder by violence. In the former method, poisoning, it seems that the murderer hopes that either the cause of death will be certified as from some other cause, or that if the poison be traced, then it will not be proved that he administered it. The other type of murder, violence, sets a very different problem. It is this: either the murderer must disappear, or the body must disappear, or both. Let us deal with the disposal of the body. How often has this been attempted, and how often has the attempt failed? Dr. Crippen, who bricked up the remains of his wife in a cellar. Arthur Alfred Rouse, who burnt his victim in a motor car. Harry Dopkin, who buried his wife in a bombed-out Baptist chapel. The farmer who buried his girlfriend in a chicken run. The trunk murderers. I could go on indefinitely. To some, the burying or hiding is enough. But others, the more calculating and ingenious, resort to more horrifying acts. The mutilation of the victim in the hope that even if discovered, no means of identification will remain. Such is the case we are discussing today. And such is the case we can justly call murder most foul. November the 2nd, 1917, Regent Square, Bloomsbury, London. A street scavenger known to his friends as Jack the Sweeper, no relation to Jack the Ripper, is going about his usual business of sweeping up the leaves and debris of a London square when he comes across a parcel wrapped in sacking just inside the railings of the gardens.
Hello, what's this? Somebody left some old clothes here or something, eh? Let's have a look. What is all?
Yes, of course, you are right. Not just a body, part of a body. Headless, legless, and handless. The body, or its remains, was covered with delicate underclothing of lace and blue ribbon and was wrapped in a sheet. There was also a torn piece of brown paper on which had been scrawled B-L-O-D-I-E B-E-L-G-I-U-M. Bloody Belgium.
Have you found anything else, Sergeant?
Yes, sir. A search was made in the vicinity immediately after the discovery. A little distance away, in another part of the garden, we found the legs of the victim wrapped in paper. Dr. Spilsbury is taking a look at those now.
Good. If there's one man in London who may help us, it's Dr. Bernard Spilsbury.
Even in those days, the name of young Dr. Bernard Spilsbury had earned the respect and admiration of Scotland Yard. Spilsbury, a hard-working pathologist, had devoted his career and life towards the study of the medical aspect of crime. The problem put to him in this case was one of the most difficult in his professional career.
I'm afraid there's no hope of positive identification of the victim until the missing head can be found. It is, of course, a woman, but I think if you can give me a little more time, I may be able to help you with some more information. I'm going back to my laboratory now, and I'll be in touch with you later in the day.
Very good, Dr. Spilsbury. Meantime, I'll do everything I can on my side. Of course, there wasn't much to work on except for that bit of paper. Bloody Belgium. I see it spelled B-L-O-D-I-E. I wonder what that means.
That remains to be seen.
Although World War I was at its height, London was horrified by the atrocious murder of this unknown woman. The scrawled message on the piece of paper naturally gave rise to the suggestion that the victim was a Belgian refugee. Meantime, the investigation, in the hands of Chief Inspector Frederick Wensley, one of the toughest, shrewdest, and most relentless detectives who ever served Scotland Yard, went forward.
There's no need for me to tell you, Sergeant, it's time which counts in this case. Every hour we waste in fruitless inquiries may give the criminal an additional chance to destroy evidence and cover up his tracks.
Yes, sir. What's your line going to be, sir?
I want every scrap of evidence that we found brought in here to the yard. We'll go over it piece by piece. I can't see that bloody Belgium message is going to help us much, but there may be something else. We'll only find out if we look for it.
And find it they did. A laundry mark reading 11H in red cotton lettering worked on the corner of a bedsheet which had been the dead woman's shroud. Chief Inspector Wensley immediately had instructions flashed to all London police divisions for inquiries to be made at every laundry in the London area and to ascertain the name of the customer whose belongings bore this identification mark, 11H.
That's to every London division for immediate inquiries to be made at every laundry in the London area. You've got the details, Sergeant. 11H.
Very good, sir. I'll push the message out straight away.
Within 24 hours, the laundry using this particular marking was traced, and our books reveal that the symbols 11H referred to a house in Munster Square, Regent's Park. This was the address of Madame Emilienne Gerard, a woman of 31, whose husband, a French chef, was serving with the army in France. Inspector Wensley immediately went round to the flat where he found the front door locked.
I'll give a knock, Sergeant.
More sound?
I don't like it. All right, Sergeant, we'll break the door down.
Very good, sir.
All right, I'll go first. Now, this is the place, all right.
Has been a fight in here, sir?
Apparently. All those bedclothes in the corner. Check them over, Sergeant, and see if they match with the sheet we have.
Looks like it, sir. And take a look at this counterpin, covered with blood.
Yes, I see.
And over here, sir, there's a bucket. It's full of water. It looks as though there's blood in it, too.
Yes. The murder may have been committed here. All the same, there are one or two things I don't quite understand. We'll get Dr. Bernard Spilsbury along and see what he thinks of it. There's a phone box right opposite. Here's his telephone number. Ask him to meet me here in half an hour.
Very good, sir.
No, I agree with you, Wednesday. Despite all the appearances, the murder was not committed here.
What makes you so sure?
Those blood stains. Now, you see this one here on the sheet. And this one on the counterpane. They're smeared. Now, a blood stain caused from a wound would be very different. Blood from a wound would spurt. Someone has smeared blood about this place and tried to create the impression that the murderer washed his blood-stained hands in this bucket of water.
Yeah. Yes, I'm inclined to agree with that theory, Dr. Spilsbury. Now, let's see what we can find out about Madame Gerard.
I can tell you that the woman whose body was found had not been dead more than 36 hours.
That's a help. We can take it that the sack found in Regent Square had been discovered pretty soon after it was left there.
Why?
Well, there was a heavy rainstorm at 4:30 in the morning of November the 2nd, and the ground underneath the sack was wet.
That means that the murderer must have waited 24 hours before disposing of the body.
Let's suppose that the body is that of Madame Gerard. What was he doing on the night of the 31st October?
There was an air raid that night, sir.
Yes, the Gothams came over. Plenty of confusion. Perhaps a good night for a murder. Let's find out who was the last person to see Madame Gerard.
It transpired that Madame Gerard had not been seen since 11:15 on the night of October the 31st. In view of Dr. Spilsbury's evidence, it looked as though the inspector was right and that she had been murdered about the time the air raid was in progress. According to witnesses, Madame Gerard had left her flat late that night to take refuge. Back to the flat in Munster Square went Inspector Wensley and his assistant to search it yet again for possible clues.
Here's something, sir. I found it among the papers in this desk.
Give it to me. I owe you £50. L-E-O-I-S-I-N.
Yes, sir.
Voisin.
It's payable on the 1st of November.
Voisin. I don't think you've heard that name before in this case.
No, sir. That name's not among the witnesses. I'll ask the landlord to see if he knows anybody called Voisin.
The landlord proved to be a very loquacious man. He most certainly knew Voisin. He knew all about it. He knew all about all the residents in the flats in Munster Square. The difficulty was to keep him on the subject in hand. Voisin, it seemed, used to be a friend of Madame Gerard's husband, who was a French chef, and Voisin, being a butcher, they had much in common. Gerard used to buy supplies from Voisin at his place in Spitzfield Market. Then Gerard went abroad to fight for France. Afterwards, then, the landlord, Mrs. Gerard, acted as a sort of housekeeper for Voisin. But now she had been at the present flat for some time. Voisin still lived at Charlotte Street, Fitzroy Square.
It's funny you should ask about Mr. Voisin. I hadn't seen him for some time, but he came round here to the house the other afternoon.
Which afternoon?
Well, it would be the afternoon after Madame Gerard disappeared.
And the afternoon before we discovered the body.
That's right, November the 1st it was. He came round in the afternoon just after lunch. Well, I remember what he said to me.
Good evening, Mr. Voisin. You're quite a stranger. I haven't seen you for some time. It's about Madame Gerard I have called. I don't think she's in. Come to think of it, I haven't seen her since yesterday.
I have a message for you for her. She'll be away for several weeks.
Oh, nothing the matter, I hope?
No. It's nothing important. It's just to tell you that she will be away.
Oh, I see.
Oh, by the way, I have to tell you that Madame Gerard is expecting a sack of potatoes. And she says, would you be good enough to take them in while they are delivered, you know?
Yes, of course I will. And tell Madame Gerard I hope we'll see her back very soon.
Yes, I'll tell her that.
And that's the last time I see Mr. Voisin.
See? What else do you know about this man?
Well, I know he's got the key to Madame Gerard's flat because I saw him letting himself in there.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, what's more, I reckon it was his money which used to pay her rent.
Have you got any proof of that?
Ulrich used to pay me every Friday after he'd been to see her. And if he was late or didn't come, then I noticed he didn't pay me until he'd been.
And he used to be his housekeeper?
Yes, sir. But I think they was pretty good friends.
So it appears.
Well, will there be anything else you'll be wanting me for, sir?
No, not at the moment. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, in that case, I'll be getting back downstairs. Good morning, sir.
You think Voisin's our man, sir?
I can't say as yet, but I certainly think we'll have a look at him.
Will you ring round to see him, sir?
I think it might be a good idea to look at the place where he lives first. It might pay to give Monsieur Voisin a little surprise.
Scotland Yard detectives reconnoitered Voisin's address in Charlotte Street and found that he lived in a basement flat near some stables. Voisin had until recently been a sorter employed by a wholesale butcher at Smithfield Market, but was now in charge of his employer's horses. Having sized up the situation, the man from the yard planned a raid. That afternoon, Voisin, together with a woman friend, Bertha Roche, were seated in the living room of their flat when suddenly...
Oh, what in the name of the devil?
Oh, I don't know, Monsieur Voisin. We're the police.
What do you want?
What the yard wanted was evidence, and Voisin's flat told a terrible story. The doors and walls were spattered with blood. Examination of Voisin's flat left no doubt that it had been the scene of an awful crime. This time, Dr. Spilsbury could confirm the authenticity of the evidence.
All right, Monsieur Voisin. I think you'll have to come along with me to Bow Street.
Must she come too?
Yes, I shall want the lady as well.
May I pack some of my things?
I'm afraid at the moment I can't allow you to touch anything or take it away with you.
Very well.
Come along now.
While Voisin and Bertha Roche were taken to Bow Street, detectives questioned their neighbors for further evidence. It appeared that on the night of October the 31st, the voices of two women in violent altercation had been heard coming from Voisin's room. This had not commanded much attention at the time on account of the air raid. At about 8 o'clock the following morning, Bertha Roche had been seen by one of her neighbors drawing water from a tap. The neighbor spoke to her and she replied that Voisin had been killing a calf and that she was fetching water to wash his shirt. At Bow Street, Chief Inspector Wednesday took in hand the interrogation.
I should like to know how long you've known Madame Gerard.
I wish to protest against this indignity. I've been brought here like a criminal. I demand justice.
If you'll answer my questions, we may be able to do something about that. Now, suppose you calm down, Mr. Voisin, and tell me how long you've known Madame Gerard.
Oh, about 18 months.
And when did you last see her?
Oh, let me see now. It would be the 31st of October, yes. She told me she was leaving for France on a visit to her husband.
And why did you call at Madame Gerard's room the following day?
Simply to feed the cat.
And what about the bloodstains on the walls of your flat?
He's been killing a calf.
Thank you, Miss Roche, but I asked Mr. Voisin the question.
What she says is true.
In that case, you'll have no objection to being searched?
No, I do not object.
Very well.
Voisin was searched, and the key to the door of a cellar in Charlotte Street was found in his pocket. Detectives were dispatched to search the cellar, and there, buried in a tub of sawdust, they found the missing head and hands of the murdered woman. Voisin and Bertha Roche were detained at Bow Street for the night, while Wensley carefully considered the evidence against them. It was a matter of common sense that one or the other, or both of them, had murdered Madame Gerard. In view of the medical report, however, the extent to which Voisin might be implicated was uncertain. A test occurred to Wednesday which would go a long way towards determining the guilt or innocence of Voisin, and he decided to apply it. It is often a mistaken impression that a police officer may not question a suspect. That is not so. The only rule is that a police officer must administer a caution when he has made up his mind to charge a suspect. No sensible police officer makes up his mind to charge until he has sufficient evidence. He can therefore go on questioning a suspect until the position arises. Once the officer has all the evidence he wants, there is, of course, no point in asking any more questions. At the subsequent trial, Inspector Wednesday's actions were challenged, but Wednesday was perfectly within his rights as a police officer in acting as he did. He had Voisin and Bertha Roche brought before him.
Now, Mr. Voisin, I wonder if you'd be prepared to help me.
What do you want me to do?
Have you any objection to writing the words Bloody Belgium on this piece of paper?
No, not at all.
Very well. Thank you. Would you mind writing it again? It'll do on the same piece of paper.
All right.
Thank you. And once again. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, by the way, I see you spell bloody B-L-O-D-I-E.
Yes.
And you spelt it that way 3 times.
Yes.
Mr. Voisin, do you always spell it that way?
I don't know.
Louis Voisin and Bertha Roche, I'm going to charge you with the murder of Emilien Gerard. I must warn you that anything you may say may be taken down as evidence and used at your trial.
Louis, you fool, you've done this.
Hey, be quiet, woman.
You brute, you've deceived me.
Be quiet. I tell you, be quiet.
Two days later, Voisin volunteered a statement. It was an attempt to adapt his own story to the discoveries he knew the police had made. and at the same time to exonerate Bertha Roche.
She isn't concerned in this crime. I went to Madame Gerard's place, and when I arrived, the floor and the carpet were covered with blood. The head and the hands were wrapped up in a flannel jacket. They were on the kitchen table. The rest of the body was not there. Oh, I was so astonished at such an affair that I did not know what to do. I remained 5 minutes stupefied. I thought that her trap had been laid for me. I commenced to clean the blood, and my clothes became stained with it. I left the head and the hands in the things they were wrapped up in. I then back to my flat, had lunch, and later returned to Madame Gerard's room and took the packet to my place. Oh, I kept thinking this was a trap. I had no intention of doing any harm to Madame Gerard. Oh, why should I kill her?
It was an ingenious story which could have deceived no one. It did not explain the blood-stained condition of the living room in Charlotte Street, nor the identical handwriting of the misspelt note found with the body and the words written later by Voisin. Neither did Voisin explain why a blood-stained towel in which was one of Madame Gerard's earrings had been found in the cellar. But above all, it simply did not fit the evidence which Dr. Spilsbury had gathered from the pitiful remains. Dr. Spilsbury had in fact reconstructed the true story of the crime.
The head of the woman was covered with wounds which must have been inflicted with some weapon such as a poker. There were literally dozens of the wounds. There were cuts and bruises on the woman's hands which had been caused as she had tried to ward off the blows that had rained upon her head. Whoever had struck the blows was someone of no great physical strength. The woman died not from the direct effect of the blows, but from loss of blood. She survived the attack for probably half an hour. An examination of the heart indicates partial strangulation. We are therefore able to build up the following picture of the crime. The woman was attacked with a poker or similar weapon by someone of no great strength. She fought for her life and no doubt screamed for help. While blows were still being rained on her, a second person must have thrown something over her head, no doubt with the object of stifling her cries. Next we have a question of dismemberment. The body was dismembered by someone of unusual strength, who was accustomed to the use of a knife. The cuts indicate experience of dissection, but no surgical knowledge. We can therefore conclude that two people were concerned in the crime.
And so Dr. Spilsbury, working independently in his laboratory, had reached the same conclusions as Inspector Wensley. Madame Gerard, so far as could be discovered, had never met Bertha Roche, and did not even know of her existence. On the night of the air raid, Madame Gerard had left her flat in Regent's Park and taken shelter in a tube station. The rest can only be surmised, but we can imagine that when the all-clear signal was given, the crowd of frightened refugees was turned out so that the tube station could be closed for the night. Madame Gerard must have made her way to Poin's rooms, intending to spend the rest of the night in the security of his cellar. Here she must have found Bertha Roche. The scene between the two women can be imagined. Both had been in a hysterical terror throughout the air raid. Madame Gerard, incensed at the discovery of a rival, may have abused Bertha Roche. She, maddened by the other's taunts, must have picked up the weapon nearest to her hand and attacked the intruder. Voisin, sleeping in the next room, must have been awakened by the noise, rushed into the room, thrown a towel around the head of the screaming woman. The blows and suffocation must have continued for some time until finally Amelia and Gerard lay dead. imagine Voisin and Bertha Roche sitting up all night, thinking of ways and means of disposing of the body. And then, next day, Voisin visiting Madame Gérard's flat to lay a false tale of evidence, all to no avail. And finally, Voisin going out on his awful task of disposing of the body. The trial came on at the Old Bailey before Mr. Justice Darling. Spilsbury and Wensley were convinced in their own minds that Bertha Roche must have attacked Madame Gérard, but there could be no legal proof of this. A submission was made on her behalf that there was no case to go to the jury, and the judge gave his ruling.
There is a good deal of evidence against Roche to show that she was an accessory after the fact to the murder. But there is not evidence to prove that she necessarily took part in the crime itself. I shall therefore direct the jury to return a verdict of not guilty in regard to her.
Bertha Roche upon discharge, and the trial continued with Voisin alone in the dock. The evidence of Dr. Spilsbury decided the case for the prosecution. The jury took only a quarter of an hour to decide that Voisin was guilty. Mr. Justice Darling passed sentence of death in French. On the day before Voisin was executed, Bertha Roche appeared at the Old Bailey and was sentenced to 7 years penal servitude as an accessory after the murder. She died in prison a year later. Oh, and by the way, nobody ever discovered why Voisin wrote those 2 words on the piece of paper he left with the body. Those words which were to help to hang him for a murder most foul. Well, that's all for now, but I'll be back again soon to tell you some more of the secrets of Scotland Yard. Meanwhile, this is Clive Brooks saying goodbye and pleasant dreams.